All right. So the City Nature Challenge happens April 28th through May 7th this year. It's a community science event. It's a global event that is organized on a global level by the California Academy of Sciences and the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. The City Nature Challenge started out as a competition between those two cities. They were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we put our cities against each other and tried to figure out how, or tried to see how much biodiversity data we could collect in each city. And it has since grown to over 400 cities across the globe. And so just if you're not super familiar with community science is the meaningful involvement with volunteers or the public in research projects. So it kind of takes that education and engagement component with rigorous science and puts it together as community science. So the focus on urban biodiversity, according to the United Nations, 55% of the global population lives in urban areas, and that's only growing. It's projected to get to 68% by 2050. So these urban areas to handle the population are growing bigger and encompassing more space. So that urban biodiversity specifically speaks to the populations of life that live in those urban areas. And so to better understand what we have in those urban areas, we do events like the City Nature Challenge to collect that biodiversity data. The City Nature Challenge has 5 main goals. One is to connect people to local nature in those urban or metro areas. The next is to connect people to each other, to build community, both online and locally, to collect that urban biodiversity data and make it available to managers and scientists and city planners, that sort of thing. And then to grow volunteer biodiversity documentation across the globe, and also just to have fun through some friendly competition or collaboration. So the City Nature Challenge, even though it's April 28th through May 7th, it is split into 2 parts. The first would be the observation period. So this is when we ask people to go out and find wildlife. So the wildlife can be anything from animals, plants, fungi, insects, whatever you can find around your home, in your park, and along the street. And then we ask people to take a photo. It can be with their cell phone or a camera, and just to make sure you know where that information or where that photo was taken. So it's really easy on your phone. You know, you have your location. If you have your location on, that's an easy way to track where it's spotted. And then we're asking you to share your photos. So the photos, observation, location, data, and other important information through iNaturalist. If you haven't heard of iNaturalist yet, that's okay. We're going to go through it in a little bit later. The second part of the City Nature Challenge is the identification period. So just as fun or as important, but maybe a little less fun, depending on who you are. We collect all of this data, but then we have to identify it, right? So the identification period goes from May 2nd to May 7th. And that's when we ask people to jump on iNaturalist and just help identify everything that was found within that 4-day observation period. So in Nebraska, we do have 5 participating cities. So the Omaha metro area, Lincoln, Lancaster County, Norfolk, Madison County, North Platte, Lincoln County, and then Scottsbluff County. And as you see, most of these have a county associated with them too. You can kind of choose when you're setting up your project for the City Nature Challenge if you want to go just your city area or if you want to go your county. And most of us chose to go through the county. So the Omaha City Nature Challenge is organized by the Henry Doorly Zoo and Aquarium. The other 4 locations around the state are organized through Nebraska Game and Parks, and then Scottsbluff County, the partner on that, the main partner is Scottsbluff County, or sorry, Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. So generally speaking, when you participate in the City Nature Challenge and you're uploading things to iNaturalist, you don't have to join a certain project, which we'll talk about projects later, on iNaturalist to participate. You can just upload your information and it automatically populates to that project as long as you're within those parameters. So the parameters of the county, for example, in Lancaster County. However, if you are not within a participating city, you can still participate in the City Nature Challenge. They set up this global project, and you do have to go on to iNaturalist and click join, which you can see in that upper right-hand corner. There's a join button, and as long as you join that project, all of your observations during that 4-day period will count towards the totals of the global project. So the City Nature Challenge, just talking about the collaboration and how it's grown. So last year it was 445 cities. And just for reference, in 2016, when they started, there were the 2 cities that I spoke about earlier. 2019, it was up to 159 cities and over 400,000 observations. In 2022, it was almost 2 million observations, so 1.7 observations found around the world of that biodiversity data in urban areas. The results from last year included over 2,000 rare or endangered species. So the City Nature Challenge is not just collecting information on common species, but it's also collecting really important information on species we might not see as much. So county records are found during the CNC. Here in Nebraska, records of our Tier 1 and Tier 2, so those species of greatest conservation concern, are also being found during the CNC. And just so you know, for the numbers we're trying to beat this year. Last year, we had over 3,000 observations found here in Nebraska. And out of that, there were over 800 species identified during the CNC. So those are the numbers we're trying to beat this year, and we're really hoping that you and your classrooms or your educational programs can help us do that. So what are people getting out of the City Nature Challenge? Why is it important educationally? As you can see here from a survey they did I believe it was 2022, 95% of respondents said they learned something new about the plants and animals in their local area. 50% said they learned something new about the threats to plants and animals in their area. And 70% said they learned about different ways they can contribute to protect the local environment. So people are getting some good educational components out of participation in the City Nature Challenge. It's connecting people to their local environments, connecting them to conservation efforts, and it is also providing this really cool, valuable data to researchers as well through that iNaturalist app. Before we go any further, does anybody have any questions about what this City Nature Challenge is, kind of the goals or objectives of the event and just as a whole? Okay. If not, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Jack, who's going to talk about Project Learning Tree.
Yes, thanks, Allie, for introducing that. And I know we have a lot of folks on this call who might already be familiar with Project Learning Tree. So go ahead and just put in the chat box if you've heard of PLT before, or if you've attended one of our Nebraska workshops, or maybe you've attended a workshop that was in a different state, or also if you're familiar with like Project Wet or Project Wild, which are very similar sister programs. So you can go ahead and advance the slide, Allie. It looks like we have a few folks who might be familiar with Project Learning Tree. So Project Learning Tree, and if you haven't heard of it, it is a international environmental education curriculum program. And so if we think of the 1970s, Right in the beginning, right, we had all of this environmental movement happening in the United States in especially the late 60s and early 70s, right? If we think of if you're a non-formal educator and maybe you had an environmental policy class in your undergrad, right? We had the passage of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, these watershed moments with federal legislation passed in the late 60s and early 70s as the result of really big environmental phenomena that we were seeing in our world around us, right? The threatened and endangered species like the loss of the bald eagle across most of the continental United States, or the water issues that were happening like in the Ohio River Valley, where the river was so polluted that it would light on fire because of all the pollutants, right? And so that really led citizens like you and us on this call to really push for public action to protect the environment, right? Because of our hope to protect not only our natural resources, but also to benefit our human lives in our communities. And so, as this was happening, right, educators like you and I were looking for high quality instructional materials to teach about these concepts and these things that were in the public discourse, right, with legislation or in the public view, with like Silent Spring being published by Rachel Carson and other major works by like the likes of Aldo Leopold, right, in our classrooms and in other educational settings. And so a group came together, forming with environmental education experts from agencies at the state and federal level, as well as private industry and educational experts from universities and colleges and school districts. And that group came together to create the original curriculum known as Project Learning Tree. So the first curriculum unit was published in the 1970s. And then since then, the program has, of course, modified activities and created new activities over time. If you're familiar with some of the other programs I mentioned earlier, like Project Wild, that program came shortly after Project Learning Tree was created because they wanted some more wildlife specific resources. So that curriculum was created in the early 1980s, published in 1982. And Project Wet also followed shortly after with a curriculum published in 1984 and then moved nationally in the early 1990s. And so we all kind of have these very similar roots from the three sister projects. I like to think of it as like the three-legged stool of environmental education that really a lot of us use for our programs. And so tonight we're going to go through some activities from a little unit called Biodiversity Bliss. So it's just a 3-unit lesson, or 3-lesson unit, I should say, with 3 activities from that are really great for grades 3 through 5, but educators in earlier grade levels could, of course, adapt things down or make it more complex. If you can go to the previous slide, Allie, just really quick. PLT uses forest. Oh, you can leave all the stuff on there though. That was fine. Sorry, I know I'm just kind of rambling. So PLT uses forests as a window to the world to understand, increase our understanding of our complex environment, stimulate critical and creative thinking, develop the ability to make informed decisions on environmental issues, and instill the confidence and commitment to take responsible action. And most importantly, we always like to emphasize this, that all good environmental education teaches students how to think, not what to think about complex environmental issues. And what we mean by that is that we as educators are here to hopefully help students take in the best data and science that we have to offer, including the science that they collect as part of our citizen science efforts with the City Nature Challenge, and then take in their own personal experiences with the outdoors and with the natural world to then ultimately come to their own conclusions about what to do in the face of these big picture issues like climate change or wildfires or invasive or endangered species that our natural world faces, right? The way that lessons are written is that we're never here as an educator to persuade a political agenda or inform an ideology. we want our students to build those critical thinking skills that we hope that they then put into practice as adults, right? In the state of Nebraska, we are 97.1% privately owned land in our state. And so any meaningful conservation action requires the willing and eager participation of our private citizenry. So it's really essential that as our students grow older, right, they develop those skills and ultimately then have the ability to put them into action, not only through this curriculum, but ultimately as adults. So that's we hope you kind of take away from tonight is just being comfortable with some curriculum that you can hopefully use as you're trying to integrate citizen science and the CNC into the ways that you work with students in the state of Nebraska or outside of our state if you're on the call from outside of Nebraska, in the way that you work with students. So there we go. So we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Allie. So our first activity is called charting biodiversity. And so this activity is in 2 different units. Like we mentioned, you're going to get a copy digitally of the biodiversity blitz little unit, but it's also in our K-8 Explore Your Environment activity guide, which is the new kind of flagship curriculum resource for K-8 in Project Learning Tree. And so we have those page numbers on there. What we want you to think about is what comes to mind when you think of the term biodiversity? Go ahead and put your best definition in the chat box for us this evening. Julia says the variety of living things living in the same place. Nick says the variety of species in a particular environment. And those are some great example definitions. Emily says the vast amount of animals, insects, etc., in an area. Great ideas. So this activity kind of helps students understand their piece of biodiversity, as well as start to use skills like observation and sorting and critical thinking to then examine that definition and kind of build a framework which they can use then to approach observation of the natural world in their local environment. And so what we're going to do today is one of my favorite things to do in a virtual workshop. We're going to do a Jamboard. So I'm going to go ahead and, if Allie's all right, I'm going to try and share my screen just so I can share what we're going to do before we send you into some breakout rooms to then do the Jamboard. So here on the first page of the Jamboard, we have some just little quick instructions that show you how to use Jamboard. For tonight's exercise, you're just going to really use the toggle. So when you click the link, when I put the link in the chat here in a second, you'll just use your little select arrow. But if you want to, as a group in your small group, use any of the other collaboration tools like sticky notes or text boxes, you can use those as well. But here, so you're gonna be in a Zoom breakout room with just a couple other folks this evening, and we have some little cards that PLT has put together. And what we want you to do is try to sort these in whatever way makes the most sense for your group. After you're done sorting, and you can, of course, introduce yourselves and get to know one another a little bit during our time together. I'm also going to share in the link or via a link, a student sheet with a chart. And so once you kind of sorted these cards, go ahead and have somebody in your group as your like team leader or scribe, go ahead and kind of fill out that chart with, all of your group's members' input. With what pieces and parts you have sorted from the little pictures that we have here. And one thing to note is that on the corner of these little boxes here, we have the room numbers. So if you're in breakout room number 1, you can just go to slide number 2 technically, but it has room number 1 on the corner. So if you go into breakout room 2, you'll be on slide 3 or the one that says room 2. So just note that as you go, so that way you can all collaborate. Also, if you are maybe on your phone or on a device where you really can't interact with Jamboard tonight, that's a-okay. You can just go ahead and hopefully you'll be in a space with a couple other folks that you can then, talk cooperatively with your other group members, and then one person can share and sort based off of everybody's feedback. So I know sometimes we run into some technical difficulties. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the links in the chat box, but do we have any questions about kind of our task for the next little bit of time before we go into this first activity? Let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen again, just to share kind of some of how you sorted those cards. It's always fun to see what people do in Jamboards. And we'll have, if anyone from room number 1 would like to share kind of their thoughts or what you all discussed in your little breakout session. I know we didn't have a lot of time that we spent in our breakout rooms, so no worries if we didn't get everything accomplished. But how did you sort your cards, and what were your thoughts as you were starting to maybe fill out that chart or think about these different aspects of biodiversity? And just to refresh, I believe room 1 was the room with Amy, Christina, Julia, and Nick. So would one of you want to either share by unmuting or share in the chat box some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll do it. So we looked at the different cards that we received for this task, and we looked at the sheet and saw that there was a grid of different categories that all seem to fit with each other, but still be different. So we decided to arrange it based on the largest order of life first, which was a biome. And those included water, desert, grassland, and forest. And then from there, we looked at what kinds of characteristics we would find in those particular ecosystems. These included a physical characteristic and a behavioral characteristic. So in water, you would, like the shell would need an exoskeleton in order to protect itself. And then animals in water swim. That's how they move. And then it was a similar idea for grassland, where in grassland you have large soaring hawks which have feathers and they fly or glide, but they wouldn't do that in a forest, because if it's a large soaring bird, the trees would clip their wings. So the idea we did was we related biome to form, function, and behavior, and that's how we arranged them.
Well, you had some great science teachers there, right? So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. It's like all of the NGSS in 2 sentences. So but that's great. Did you get to the part in the chart where, I don't know if you noticed, but at the last part of the chart it mentions like kind of thinking of an animal that would fit that biome or fit those characteristics? Did you guys get to that part, or were we just sorting?
We were just sorting.
Okay, no worries. So room number 2, so slide 3, does anyone want to share from your group about how you kind of put everything together, or how you sorted those characteristics?
We also were just sorting. We did not see the chart. So we kind of just grouped them in similarities, and I am not a super science person like the last group. So we put them into groups of similarities, like they said functions. So crawl, hop, walk, or run, fly and glide, or swim. Those are all modes of basically transporting from one place to another. grassland, desert, forest, water is all places where insects or animals would habitat. Exoskeleton, feathers, or fur is all that outer layer. Burrow, we didn't really know where to put that one. That could be a home. I guess it could be like water, or it could be the active action of burrowing. We didn't put that one in a category.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks for sharing. And I like your logical approach to the characteristics. And then yeah, I think in this they actually do mean burrow as a verb, not a noun. But you know, that's yeah, I would just say digging. But that's just me. So thanks for sharing, friends. This is kind of a speed dated version of the activity. So I'm going to share a few things about the lesson as a whole. So this comes again from the biodiversity blitz lesson. And so if you can see, I'm going to split or share my screen again with the PDF of this document. And so you're going to receive via email a PDF of this today. So actually, you can chat box me, and if you need to, you know, you don't have to put your email address just to everybody. You can just like DM or directly message or chat box me in Zoom your email where you'd like to get the curriculum tonight. But this is in the biodiversity blitz unit. And so in this curriculum activity, you actually start with like a guiding question, very similar to what we did. You can ask students about characteristics of what makes an animal an animal. So like, what does a squirrel do? And how does a squirrel be a squirrel? And then similar to what we did, right, you have the little cards or the characteristics, and you can give students it says a bag or some sort of container where you can have them put those characteristics. So where I live, how I move, what I wear. And then having them match up in the student page after they've done that pre-sorting to put them in those columns, and then eventually identify a species of animal that would make fulfill all of those characteristics. So they can do some research potentially. Maybe if you're in a setting where you're one-to-one, they could do some Googling or their own research, right, to help learn more about species from a particular environment or habitat. And then presenting, you know, their charts and what they came up with at the end. So you can also, of course, make this a variation with plants instead of animals. So you just use some different pictures. And it gives some examples of prompts that you could use. All of the new K-8 curriculum activities for PLT have these wonderful little take it outside boxes that give you direct ideas about how to take this lesson outdoors. And so for this one, it talks about giving students magnifying glasses and journals to locate different species that might fit into those boxes after you do the lesson. And then there's our correlations to standards and assessment and enrichment opportunities. And this one kind of gives a little bit of an adaptation rummy or spice of life game is what they call it in this book. You can have kids kind of play with those cards at the end of the activity. So again, all the PLT activities are really written in this easy to use format. It's just like a recipe. So you have at the beginning of the lesson, a title and time considerations, anything that you need to do to get ready, educational objectives, and then it has our background for educators. This one just references a different background for another activity that Emily will lead at the end of tonight. And then that step-by-step recipe book that you can use on how to do the activity, followed by those student sheets, like we shared tonight via the Jamboard and the chat. And of course, these are also available online from Project Learning Tree. Let me get my things switched over here from plt.org, and they're also now available in Spanish. So if you're working with students from that demographic audience, that is something that is available for you. So I'll also give a quick tutorial here before we move into our next activity of just how are you going to find this lesson when I send it to you. I'll also send a follow-up email just so with some extra
Hey,
instructions.
Jack, sorry to
Oh.
interrupt. Can we go ahead and do the other activities so they have time to go outside before it gets dark?
Sure.
And then
Yeah.
we'll do
Totally.
this after.
Yes.
Thank
Totally.
you.
Yeah, I will. Let me see. Is my screen still sharing? Oh, well, let's stop share. I'll hand it off to Emily, who has our next activity then from the same unit, Biodiversity Blitz.
All right, great. And let me share my screen here. Okay. All right, can everyone see that then? Good. All right, awesome. Okay, so like Jack said, the next activity that is in that 3-lesson activity guide is Discover Diversity. And this activity is recommended for grades 3 through 5, but this one in particular can be easily done with older kids, middle school, even high school, and younger kids with easy modifications. I've done this personally with middle school kids and it worked great. So the guide can also be found in the Explore Your Environment. If you are PLT certified, you can find it there as well. All right, so I'm going to have you imagine for a minute that you're a visitor from outer space and you're viewing life on Earth for the first time. And so making detailed observations in the section of your yard, what do you think you would find? What do you think you would notice? What do you think you would wonder? Okay, so kind of setting up for our activity. And like Ali said, you'll be going outside. So what I want you to do, I'm not going to waste time since I don't know where you all are at, but it is very windy outside my window and starting to get dark. So I want you to quick grab a piece of paper, something to write with. And I want you, when you go outside, to select an area of your yard. Think of an area about the size of a hula hoop, okay? And you can go ahead and kind of start thinking about where that might be in your yard. And I want you to go outside and just start jotting down all of the living and non-living things that you see in that space. And I'm going to give you 10 minutes, we'll do 8 minutes to do this. And 8 minutes may seem like a long time. So I really challenge you to dig deep and use those observation skills to find details that you might not normally notice when you're outside. We will be sharing out when you come back in. Are there any questions about what you should be doing when you're outside? Okay, go ahead, grab a piece of paper, something to write with, head outside, find an area about the size of a hula hoop, and just start jotting down all the living and non-living things you see. Come back here at 8:01. All right, well, we will go ahead and get started again. We may have 1 or 2 people still hopping back on, but any volunteers that want to share what they noticed? And first, tell us what area of your yard you observed, and then maybe one or two things that you observed. And you can go ahead and unmute if you'd like to share, or throw it in the chat.
I checked out a little flower patch by my front door. I don't know if you guys can see me. I'm walking my dog. Sorry.
That's okay.
But I just saw just a whole bunch of like flowers popping up, weeds, rocks, flock, some other flowers. I don't know, needles from pine trees. I don't know. I didn't see any animals or critters.
Okay.
But that's all I saw.
All right. Thanks for sharing, Amy. And
Yeah.
Julia posted in the chat that she was looking at the parking lot by the river, grass, dead leaves, an ant, dirt grain-sized rock. Thank you, Julia. So obviously that was, oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just gonna tell you what I found.
Go ahead.
Okay. I saw little purple flowers that have 4 petals on them. I didn't plant them there. They're just little wild flowers. But then there's some tulip shoots coming up, but sticking out of the ground, there's like 2 other bulbs. They didn't look like tulip bulbs, so I'm not really sure what kind of bulbs they are. Just feathers, little round seeds, I think from a tree maybe. Little bug with little wings. Like that.
Thank you. So obviously you all just had a short amount of time to make observations. If we had more time, I could really challenge you by having you sit there longer. And the longer you sit, the harder it becomes, right? You have to make even more detailed observations and dig a little bit deeper. What factors do you think might change or impact what you observe in an area? And again, you can throw it in the chat or you can unmute. Oops. Yeah, weather absolutely can impact what you see. Maybe the time of year. So what we see in early spring may be very different than what you see in late spring, summer, fall, winter. That would certainly change your observations. Oh, Amy saw some bunnies eating plants. Hopefully not your garden plants. It's a little early for the garden, I suppose, so. Oh, yep, Emily, thank you. Where you're located absolutely can make a difference. Yeah, so the idea of this activity is really to get students making those detailed observations and starting to appreciate the amount of biodiversity that we find in our world and that we can find even in small places like the size of a hula hoop or a square meter. And who cares? I mean, why do we care about biodiversity? Why does it matter? At the museum, we care about biodiversity because that's how we understand the world around us. That's how we understand what is found in a location. So in a specific prairie or in a county or in a state, that's how we understand what's found there, by going out and collecting and making observations. Yes, Julia, the greater the biodiversity, the healthier the habitat, absolutely.
I was just going to chime in and say biodiversity can help create resiliency. So from my agency's standpoint, we like to measure tree diversity in what we call the community forest. So that's the trees that live where people live. So in towns and cities and parks. And we really want to make sure that not one species has more than 25% of the community forest in a specific area, right? Because if we get an invasive species or a disease, right, like the emerald ash borer that is invading Nebraska right now, right, we can see really big loss in our community forest. So when we have a really diverse ecosystem in the environment, right, it makes that whole community of species more robust in case that there is a disease or something that changes in that environment around them.
Absolutely. And it's also hard to protect if we don't know what's already there. So when speaking about conservation efforts of different species, if we don't know their historical range or habitat, it's hard to make decisions to protect that species. So the activity, Jack already kind of quickly scrolled through the layout of the previous lesson that he shared from the PLT guide that you guys will get today. So this activity has a similar layout. Obviously, we did a very, very shortened version of it. So there's the lesson itself provides a lot more background information, connects it to standards, gives some ideas for follow-up. It actually has the students going out and creating their own space, physically using a hula hoop and tossing it down in a space, or using string and stakes to create a square meter or a space to make their observations. There's suggestions about going back and observing the same location more than one time. So maybe students observe their location once a week or once a month to see those changes over time. So great activity. Again, the lesson and the guide you will get is for grades 3 through 5, but this activity definitely can be used for older students, and it can be simplified and made age appropriate for early childhood as well. All right. Allie, do you want me to control the PowerPoint for your slides?
Actually, let's let Jack go through the how to access really quick, and then we'll go on to using iNaturalist and how to use it with your classrooms for the CNC.
Perfect.
Yeah, so hopefully this has given you just a little bit of I know we're doing project learning tree, but you got your feet wet a little bit with our curriculum unit tonight. So and so tonight you hopefully will receive an email from me with an access, or not from me, actually. It'll come from PLT National. So for plt@forests.org is what the email address you'll receive. So if you don't get the access code, check your spam filter, because since it's an automated email, it might go in there. But basically, you're going to get an access code that unlocks the curriculum unit. And so to kind of use your access code, there'll be a link in that email to go to plt.org/login. If you've never used like the online resources from PLT, you'll have to create an account here. I already have an account, so I'll just put in my information and click login. Once you click login, you'll kind of fill out a profile just with your information and how just for their own databases. But then you can go over to this little book here that says My Materials, and you'll click on, you can click on that. You can also click on Use Quick Tools to use an access code with that little locksmith. And so once you click on that link, it'll say I have an access code, and then you'll just copy and paste or type your code in there. So we'll also send a follow-up email with like a PDF with those instructions, because I know it's like a little bit of a step to get through, but once you go ahead and use that code, that resource will then show up on your account under that little My Materials tab. So let me I'm going to go ahead and switch my little pages over. Obviously, like I have a lot of different things in here, but if you once you use that code, you'll have this little frog, which is the cover of the unit, and Biodiversity Blitz, and then you just click on activities and it'll download as a PDF. It is password protected to your account, so you'll have to reuse that password that you use for your PLT account once you download the PDF, just to make sure that like the activities maintain their integrity and don't get like emailed everywhere which way. So that's how you will get me your materials. So again, if you haven't already done so, just send me a private chat with your email address. I also have some emails from our registration that we'll be sending out to you with those codes. So, and then as always, feel free to reach out to me if you run into any technical issues or glitches. And I'll hand it back to Allie.
Great, thanks, Jack. All right, can everybody see the screen for iNaturalist? No. One moment, please. Okay, how's that? Yeah, okay. All right, so iNaturalist is the platform we use for the City Nature Challenge. And so the activities that we went through, we thought tied really well in with the City Nature Challenge. So if you were going to do the CNC with a group, either a classroom or a different group, and you wanted to do some activities to get ready, or so pre or post the CNC itself, these activities that we went over today tie in just really well with the City Nature Challenge. So iNaturalist is both a app and web, and essentially it's a database of observations that people have found. It's really for wild observations of plants or animals or fungi that can be found in nature. And you can use it either on your phone or on the web browser, and we'll kind of look at both today. So with iNaturalist, you record your observations, then you share them out through the platform, and then it's connected to all the other iNaturalist users. So as an iNaturalist user, I can upload my observations, but I can also view other people's observations. And if I know something, I can share that information. So I can identify other people's observations as well and discuss my findings with other people. So there really is that community of naturalists built into it. So because of this, it's important to remember iNaturalist is open for conversation amongst people. And so when you're working with students, you might want to consider that and have maybe one iNaturalist account that the teacher controls, and then the students are providing those images to upload. If you're under 13, it's not recommended to have your own iNaturalist account. So one thing I've done with students is I've given them digital cameras or tablets or something else. They take the pictures and then I upload them to iNaturalist. And then we look at them on the website and we talk about what we have found. Another thing you could do is there is a sister platform called Seek, and Seek is designed for children. So there's no interface with the public with Seek. They're using that to do the same thing, to record observations, and you can link a child's Seek account to an adult's iNaturalist account, so they can still share their observations and they can still count for the CNC, but they wouldn't have that account that can, have conversations with other people, if that makes sense. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. So the elements of the observation on iNaturalist, it's the what, the who, the when. So when did you find this observation? What is it? So the species. The evidence is either in a photo or a sound. You can do both using like your cell phone, either recording a sound or taking an image. You can put in descriptive information, which can be really helpful in identification. You say where you found it. And then there's also a community ID element that I spoke about. When you're taking observations for iNaturalist, it's important to think about what information do you need for someone to look at this later who wasn't with me and identify it, right? So make sure you're framing the content, you're taking multiple images. I think you can upload, it's either 4 or 5 images to one observation on iNaturalist. So getting those different angles, or like if you have a tree, think about getting like the bark and the whole tree and a leaf or something like that. Focus on wild observations. You can do captive cultivated, and if you're in a certain location, that might be something you want to do, like you're in a botanical garden, you still want to upload observations, that's okay. Just make sure you're marking captive cultivated on non-wild observations. And then consider your data. You know, if you're using your cell phone and your location's on, it's automatically going to upload that information. That's less work for you to do down the road. And then consider any privacy settings you want. I know when I upload things around my home, I tend to obscure those observations, and that just keeps other people from seeing that specific location. I also want to point out for threatened and endangered species, it automatically obscures the location, which is really nice. So kind of to protect those animals even more, or plants. So I'm going to go through kind of some steps of doing observations using your cell phone, and then we'll look at the website. So when you sign on to your iNaturalist account, it's free to create an account on your cell phone. You're going to see all your different observations, and you can kind of look at your observations, your species, the identifications, all of that. I will point out that my account's now over 1,000 observations. Thank you. Thank you very much. But when you go, if you see this little green plus down at the bottom of this first image, I can click that to create an observation, or I can go up to the 3 lines and click the 3 lines. If I click the 3 lines, it's going to bring down this menu, and I would click new observation. And then I would choose what evidence I'm going to submit. So you don't have to submit any evidence. You can go with no media and still record an observation. Still counts for the City Nature Challenge. It's okay. There's some things like birds that are really hard to get images of. It's okay. It just won't ever get to research grade, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So then you can choose to either take a photo, choose an image that you already took, which is what I often do, because sometimes it's hard to, you know, if you're looking at a lot of stuff or like the sun's glaring or something like that, sometimes it's easier to take images and upload later, or record your sound or choose a sound. So you choose that evidence, and then you're going to upload it. And then you'll click the what did you see. So when you click what did you see, it's going to have a drop down menu. And so iNaturalist uses some AI technology to help you identify things. And so it's going to shoot out all of these things that it thinks it is, right? So prairie rose comes up, smooth rose. If I didn't know if it was prairie rose or smooth rose, I wouldn't put either of those. If I wasn't pretty confident, I would just put rose. So I would type in rose, and I would click that family. So you only want to ID to the most you know, the most you confidently know. You might notice that there's 2 species in my image. So there's a wasp and a rose. I would want to upload the same image twice, one for the rose, one for the wasp. And you can see over in this 3rd picture, I did say upload it again for the wasp. And then underneath my notes, there's the date, the time, the location. I have the location visible to anyone, and then it's not captive cultivated, so I didn't mark that. And then you can also add it to a project. So if you're doing that global iNaturalist project, you would want to add to the project. So you would click that add to the project. However, if you're in one of the participating cities, you don't have to worry about that. Okay. So then this is me uploading it again for the wasps. Because I didn't know what type of wasp it was, I just put ants, bees, wasps, and sawflies, because I wasn't exactly sure. And then you can see that Susanna H went ahead and commented. She put an ID on it, and she thought it was a weevil wasp or ally. So we're getting more information about what it is, and hopefully getting to species level. So when observation gets to species level and there's a consensus of what it is, that upgrades, and it has to have media, sorry, then that updates it to a research grade observation. So that's a verifiable observation that has a consensus of the ID, if that makes sense. So that was a really quick look through iNaturalist on our phones. I do want to go really quick to the website and show you batch uploading. Okay. Okay, can you see my iNaturalist screen here? Not yet. Okay. So if I was going to, if I had a bunch of pictures I took out in the field with like a camera, it might be easier for me just to upload on the website. Sometimes I do this when I also take it on my phone just because I think it's easier to see. So I can go to upload in that upper right hand, choose files, and it'll take me to choose files, and I'm able to select which images I want. So I'm just going to choose some at random there for our purposes. And then what's really nice is you can select all. And if I got all of these from the same location and I needed to input that information, I could. And, you know, I would put in the time. I could put in something like, I don't know, field by stream, and it would go on all of them. So that's a really nice feature of the batch editing. If they were all happened to be in a botanical garden, I could say captive cultivated, and it would do them all. I wouldn't have to go through there and do it individually. And then, yeah, just to see that AI technology in action, you know, I click species name, it gives me a bunch of options of what it thinks it's seeing in the image. You can't rely entirely on the AI, but it is really helpful to help you narrow down what it could be. And then if I wanted to look further, I could click view, and it would take me to a page where I could compare those images to mine to try to get a better identification. Any questions? And then, sorry, really quick, I would just submit all 9 observations, which I'm not going to do because this was just an example. And you can submit them all at once. So that's just a really nice feature, especially if you're going to do something like giving your students iPads or cameras or something to go take the images, and then you want to upload a bunch at once. This would be a really easy way to do it. Does anybody have any questions about iNaturalist? I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And that was a really quick run through of it. It is pretty easy. I do encourage you to, if you are going to participate in the City Nature Challenge, either on your own or with a group, make sure you play around with the app or the website first, just so you can get familiar with it. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help in any way I can. I'll throw my email in the chat. Okay. All right, Jack or Emily, did you have anything else?
I just have a quick evaluation form. So we just try to do an evaluation of all of our workshops and things. So I know this is a virtual opportunity, but I have a link I put in the chat box that if you can just click that open, and then sometime this evening or tomorrow on your device, go back and open that up and fill that out. That would be awesome for us. We will send out like a little certificate of completion. I'll have time to do that early next week, probably a week from today or a week from yesterday. So next Monday, we'll send out certificates to everybody who's completed the evaluation form. Again, it just helps us improve our workshops that we offer, and gives us some more information about everybody who is here, right? And all of that sort of thing, to help with our funders that help make our programs possible. So please do make sure that you go through and do that evaluation. And that's all I have. I'll put my email in the chat box as well if you run into any issues with the eUnit or just have any other questions about Project Learning Tree or Project Wet. And Emily and Allie also are great educational resources as well. So there's lots of people all across Nebraska that are here to help you engage your students in this form of environmental education. And we're just all really excited to help you be successful this spring in implementing the City Nature Challenge.
In addition, I also put in the chat the City Nature Challenge Educator Toolkit, which is another resource you can look through for more information about how to implement it in your classrooms, and then also the iNaturalist website. Somebody asked if the recording will be available. So yes, I'm going to send it out to everybody who registered, along with some of those links that are helpful for people. And then it'll also be available on our YouTube channel in the next week or so as well. Any other questions before we go? Okay, if not, I hope you all enjoy your evening. Thank you so much for spending time with us tonight, and good luck CNC, and let me know if you have questions. Thank you.